You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 180. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today, this episode is for all the authors. You see, when COVID hit, I saw book signings getting canceled. In-person appearances for authors all being canceled, everything shut down as we knew it. We all saw this happening. And for an author, this is a big deal because this is when they get to meet their readers. They get to create these relationships and let people get to know who they are, to get their book out into the world and to visit with people. And so it crushed me as a reader. Now as an author, it crushes me even more. But as a reader, to know that this was happening to so many authors, it was just so sad because this is what you work up to. You get so excited once you've written your book and it's coming out into the world, and now you get to actually hold it and see other people holding it and all of those things. And so I created a podcast book tour. I saw that when you could record a bunch of interviews, all from the comfort of your own home, you could reach a greater audience. You could request that these go live when your book is launching. So you're reaching an even greater audience all at one time, and you're not having to worry about something like COVID, coming and ruining everything for you. So I want to talk today about what a podcast book tour is. What does that entail? Who's it for? What are the benefits of it? All of those things, all of the details, because I've written about it on my blog. I have posted about it. It's in my emails. It's in all the places, but I've never actually spoken about it on an episode. So a podcast book tour is essentially an author doing a lot of podcast interviews that circulate around their book. Now, I get a lot of questions on whether a podcast book tour is only for an author who's written nonfiction or a memoir. And my answer is absolutely not. You can do a podcast book tour no matter what genre your book is. And here's why. The interviews don't have to purely be about your book. People want to know people. They want to hear your story. And as an author, there is so much that goes into writing the book that you've written, but in who you are. What was the journey like in becoming an author? Was it hard? Did you know that this was going to be, what your path was going to take you? Did you get signed on your first book? So all of these different things, people want to know about you. We're obsessed with finding out about other human beings. I know I am. That's why I'm a reality TV junkie. I love watching Housewives and, seeing it all play out in real life. But I love interviews where I get to see a side of a person that I didn't know before. I love finding out how stories within a book, so many are based on real life experiences from the author that they've somehow tweaked in order to fit into a fiction book. And I just find that so fascinating, especially as I have been sitting here thinking about what my next book is going to be on. And should it be fiction? Should it be nonfiction? And someone said it needs to be a combination of the two. And that's when it hit me that it can be a combination of the two. And that's what so many authors are already doing. They're taking their real life experiences and putting them in their books. And the way we can find out about that is through hearing interviews with them, finding out what parts of their life are actually in the book. And they don't have to reveal everything. You'll hear in an upcoming interview that I did with Sandra Miller, who wrote Wednesdays at 1, how her real life example of being stalked by one of her husband's patients played a role in the book without diving into what her true life experience was about, but that's what it was based on. So you can see how finding out about these little tidbits of information that you wouldn't normally know because it's not really in the book. You're reading the book, but they're stories, and yet you don't know how they came about. So these are things that an author can talk about when they're writing fiction. When the book is nonfiction, then most likely we can pull from the chapter titles for the speaking topics that an author can talk about. And so it's different from a fiction book because you're not necessarily pulling from chapter titles that are telling you what that chapter is specifically about. And I think this is the tricky part for so many to understand, that a fiction author can speak on different things on a podcast interview. It's not just about the book. Whereas so many nonfiction authors are coming on and talking about their book specifically because their topics are right there in front of you within the book itself. So I already talked about having a book tour, going live with your interviews at the same time that your book is launching. And there's pros and cons to this. Well, there's no really con, but you can do this by starting early, by pitching yourself, a few months in advance of when your book is actually coming out. And I say this because then you're giving podcast hosts who want to read the book before interviewing, like myself, the time to read the book and then be able to interview you. You can absolutely request that the interview go live the day that your book is launching. Now, of course, it's going to depend on if the episodes launch on the same day of the week that your book is going to launch. I launch on Tuesdays, as you know, and a lot of book launches are also on Tuesdays. So that's very convenient. But you can also just ask if the week of your launch, if the episode could go live. And one of the cool things about that is that you're going to appear to be in all of the places at once. This is something that you could not do if you were doing one single book signing, because you're in one spot at one time versus you've just spent 30 minutes with multiple podcast hosts and now you're launching all over the country at one time. And it's a really cool thing to see that everybody's tagging you. It's all on the day of your launch. And so everything's going live at the same time. I get that this can also be overwhelming when you're the author who's got the launch and now you're being tagged in all of these places for your launch and then for the podcast interviews. But now you have all of this content. Everybody is talking about you. They're seeing you pop up in their feeds. So this is a huge benefit that you should take advantage of. Ask for it, because what's it going to do? They can say no, but at least you asked for it, and they could also say yes. So that's a huge benefit in and of itself. Another question that I always get asked, quite frequently actually, is what if my book has already come out? Is it too late to do podcast interviews? What if it's been years and it's not too late? You want a book to sell, right? I know that there's all kinds of tips and reasons and algorithms of why you want to have so many reviews, right at the get-go, so many views of your listing when your book launches. But at the end of the day, you want to make the sales, right? You want a book sale. So does it matter if your book is selling in pre-sales? Yes, but a pre-sale versus a sale on the day of versus a sale a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, when you're still making royalties off the book, a sale is a sale. And that's what you want. You want to get your name out there. You want your book to be in the right hands of those who need to read it and want to read it. And it makes sure that you're also staying top of mind for people. So you might have another book that you're working on that's going to come out. And we know that the cycle to bring a book to life, it's not an overnight process. It can take years, sometimes decades, for a book to be completed and then to be printed. So if you're doing podcast interviews this entire time, then people will recognize your name. They're going to know what you are about, what you sound like. They're already going to have this warm, fuzzy feeling for you because they've heard you on a podcast, and they're going to want to read your book. And so therefore, it does not matter if you are about to launch or if you've already launched, if it's been a few months, because the whole goal is ultimately not just sales, but to allow people to get to know you, to let them know who this person is that's taken so much time from their own lives to write this book that you've fallen in love with. That's really the key in all of this. And I think that for so many, we're brought up reading books and they're authors that we just adore, right? Like I loved Judy Blume. Who doesn't? And for so many years, it was, you saw the back cover and her photo, and that was all that you knew as someone who was reading. But now we have the opportunity to hear from her, from every author in a podcast interview. And that's what makes it so much fun to get to know that person. It really feels like you get to know them, since podcasts are these intimate conversations and you're learning something about them, something that you don't learn from their short biography that's on the back cover. It's completely different. And you get to understand the inner workings of how they created this book, how it was crafted. What were they thinking about when they started to write the book? Did it take a new direction than they first intended? What are the rituals like when they sit down and write? Are they lighting a candle? Are they outside? Do they have to go to the coffee shop? All of these things so that you get this full picture of who this person is and can actually recognize them as a human being and connect with them on that level. Of course, getting to meet an author in person and connecting on that level is absolutely amazing. And you get to take the selfie and shake their hand or give them a hug. But at the same time, a podcast interview allows an author to reach that many more readers. You're going on a show that has an audience, and you don't have to go search for these people. When you're doing a book launch, a book signing, you're sending out invitations, you're hoping that people are going to come, versus a podcast interview. You're showing up and you know that there are already listeners who are going to listen to your interview. And the more you do, the more people you're going to reach. That's just a fact. So not having to leave your home, being able to do a ton of interviews within a day, within a week, within a month, is going to make your reach so much greater. Now, it doesn't stop though with the interview. Like, I love to preach. You have to repurpose these interviews, share them, not just in your stories. You're sharing them within your feed. You can create graphics with it. You're putting it on your press page for your website, and you're putting them in all of these places and sharing them so that it continues to grow. And if you're doing what I think you should be doing in grabbing quotes from the transcript for these interviews, then you can maximize how much content you create for each interview so that it can be months from now that you look back on an interview and promote it over and over again, because people aren't going to remember, or they had that in their list of to be listened to, not their to be TBRs, but their to be listened to lists. And now they can go back and listen to it. And it also allows new readers who haven't heard of you to be able to hear from you, to fall in love with you, and to want to read your book. So there's so many benefits to doing a podcast book tour, and you don't have to only write one genre. It doesn't have to be about your life in a memoir. It doesn't have to be about your knowledge in a nonfiction book. It can literally be about anything, any topic, any type of novel. I've got right now a whole list of different types of authors that I'm working with, from pop culture to, summer beach reads, to a journal, a book filled with journal entries and life lessons, to one about a memoir with grief and life experiences in it. So it really does not matter what your book topic is. A podcast book tour is something that you can and will benefit from. So how do you get ready to have a podcast book tour? I would say create your own media kit with your speaking topics. It's the same process that goes into just regular podcast pitching, podcast interviews. And for my authors, I create a larger author media kit that includes the book and the description of the book and quick facts and that kind of a thing, so that it's all encompassing in one beautiful PDF that's branded. And then go pitch yourself. Go find where people are listening that are going to want to read your book. There are listening audiences that are going to be the exact reading audiences that you're trying to reach. So go pitch yourself. Do this. Try to do it before you launch if you're about to launch. But if you've already launched your book, then do it now. There's no better time to start than right now. So I encourage you all to do that, to launch this podcast book tour. Don't be afraid to ask for the interview to go live the week of, the day of your book launch, because it will help you in the end. And it's exciting to be able to do that for a podcast host. I love nothing more than to be able to promote a book when it's launching to my audience, to all of you, and to be able to feel like I've contributed in some way. Sharing that link of this is a book that I've not only read and loved, but here's how you can buy it, and here's what the author is like, and being able to share all of that and show how passionate and excited I am about the author and the book. To me, it's a big deal. I really appreciate getting to be a part of that. And I know that there are many, many hosts out there who feel the same way. So if you are an author, please consider doing a podcast book tour. I would love to work with each and every one of you. I love reading the books that my clients are putting out there. I love reading the books that my guests are putting out there. And I know that there's so many others who love to do the same. So make this a part of your priority to-do list, all of you authors out there, and let us get to know you, the human being, the writer who is behind the book. We want you to come out from behind the computer and let us hear from you in your words. Thank you for taking the time to write such beautiful words for the rest of us to escape to be entertained by, and to learn from.